Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video by the boxing channel that I do tend to review here and there, Dante's Boxing Nation. And I believe that I had a couple of commentators actually ask me yesterday to maybe review this video just to see what my opinions were on it. And this, once again, is going to be a conversation about Mr. Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade. And Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, of course, is getting a lot of basically turmoil right now, or he's overall getting a lot of criticism for his decision to not fight that of Zach Parker. And of course, there is a certain amount of people alleging that, all in all, that he basically just made a very, very big mistake because, of course, had he beat Zach Parker, he more than likely could have been the potential mandatory for Mr. Canelo Alvarez. Now, there's no guarantee that the fight would have happened with that anyway. There's a possibility that Canelo, could have still focused on Dimitri Bivol or went after Charlo or Benavidez or continued to fight at 175. Canelo right now, I think, is, very focused on trying to get that rematch with Mr. Dimitri Bivol. But I do think that it more than likely would have helped out Mr. Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade. But even if we just don't want to talk about that, when we really talk about Mr. Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, when we really talk about his resume, and this is not me stating that this is 100% his fault, but when we really take a look at his resume, I've seen certain fighters that overall have a less amount of fights, or all in all, that may not be, have really not even been champions, that may have a better resume than what he does. And when I'm talking about resume, I'm not talking about how many belts that you've won. I'm talking about the fighters that you have beaten. Even Ryan Garcia, if we were to talk about the fighters that he has beaten. Now, in my opinion, Javier Fortuna has never been an A-grade fighter, but at least at one point in time, he was, I believe, a multiple-time world champion. When we talk about Gervonta Tank Davis, I don't think that he has the strongest of resumes, but at least he has Leo Santa Cruz and Jose Pedraza on his resume when it comes down to it. And if we were to talk about Terrence Bud Crawford, I don't think that, the past several fighters that he has beaten, besides the exception of Sean Porter, I don't think that the majority of those fighters have really been elite, decent fighters, like a Aegis Kavalauskas and a Jeff Horn and a Jose Benavidez. Demetrius Andrade, I don't even think has even a former champion on his record. Forget about a champion when he fought them. I don't even believe that he has a former champion on his resume. That might be, all in all, probably the most shocking point that I've seen. Now, once again, I do not blame all of that on Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade. There are certain fights, in my view, that have evaded him because either A, the fighter did not seem particularly interested, or it was very clear that they did not want to fight him because maybe they thought that he would be a little bit too much risk for the reward, like that of a Jamal Charlo and maybe some other fighters out there, Gennady Golovkin, and some may even allege Canelo. But at the end of the day, there are certain decisions, in my view, that Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade has made in his career that have overall hindered him, which was the Jamel Charlo fight that could have potentially happened years upon years ago. In my view, it also would have been a smart idea to potentially go after Chris Eubank Jr. Maybe you'd also go after Danny Jacobs. But the thing is with Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, the main point with him right now is that you really have to overall try to get a big fight, and you have to get one right now. You're running out of time. You're going to be 35 years old, I believe, in February. I believe, all in all, that's when his birth date is. You're going to be 35 years old. And basically, what you're going to be remembered as is a fighter that had no big fights in his career. Now, people all in all can state all they want to about how Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade has been so avoided, but at the end of the day, there are also certain decisions that Demetrius Andrade has made that, in my view, have not been the best in his career. And turning down that Zach Parker fight, overall, from what I hear, especially the first time around, was for $1 million. Probably not the best idea. But there's only one way, in my view, that Demetrius Andrade even has a chance at fighting some of the other elite fighters like a Jamal Charlo or a Canelo or some of the other guys out there. He's going to have to go after David Benavidez. He's just going to have to. Now, maybe he can fight someone like a Caleb Plant or someone else like that. Maybe that fight would be very particularly interesting. But I just don't know if that's going to get you a big Jamal Charlo or Canelo Alvarez fight. Canelo, I think, is focused on other areas. Not only that, but one could debate that Canelo Alvarez, that he looks at Demetrius Andrade as a little bit too much risk for the reward that he brings because he just does not have that big of a fan base. And on top of that, Canelo is already fighting fighters that you could debate, in my view, are somewhat on the same level, if not above him. Because if we're really going to go there, I'm not really even 100% sure if Demetrius Andrade was on the same level as a Caleb Plant. Or maybe they're on the same level when it comes down to it, but to me, there's not really a huge difference there. And even Caleb Plant beat overall a former champion. So it just is what it is. But anyways, at the end of the day, hopefully Demetrius Andrade is able to do something with his career. But once again, like I stated, there's only one fight in my view that at this point in time is going to help him. And in my opinion, that is the David Benavidez fight. And if he is as good as what many of his fan bases always try to allege that what he is, he should be able to win that fight, or it at least should be able to be a 50-50 fight. Okay? So it is what it is. Anyways, we're going to see overall what Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation has to say. Let's get into it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So I made a video a while ago, I don't know, 6 months ago, whenever it was when Andrade pulled out of the first fight with Zach Parker. I made a video and I titled that video, Demetrius Andrade is running out of time. Demetrius is 34 years old. He was just in position to become Canelo Alvarez's mandatory at 168, fighting Zach Parker for interim title. But Andrade, he just turned the fight down. Now, Andrade was only going to make about $184,000 for the fight, which is probably most likely why he pulled out of the fight.
Right, but you know what? That excuse only runs so far. After a while, you just got to take a look at it, and it's like, how much money does Demetrius Andrade usually attract anyway? Because Andrade, I'm sorry, but I took a look at a while ago at this. I took a look, I believe, at his Instagram followers and his Twitter followers. I've seen certain fighters that have been around, at least in the limelight, for only a couple of years now, and they may have triple the following of what Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade has. Like Shakur Stevenson already has more following than what Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade has. So what I'll say is this. Basically, what my point is this. People can state all in all that people are avoiding him all they want to. But I remember certain boogeymen in certain weight divisions. Gennady Golovkin, when he was at 160 pounds, almost nobody wanted to fight him. Miguel Cotto was not even interested 100% in fighting him. Canelo, for a time, did not seem to want to fight him. Sergio Martinez definitely did not want to fight him. He didn't want, the smoke with Gennady Golovkin. Peter Quillen did not want to fight Gennady Golovkin. And eventually, even he got big fights. Nobody wanted to fight Erislandy Lara at 154 pounds. But even eventually, he got big fights. Canelo fought him. Austin Trout fought him. Jarrett Hurd fought him. So my question is with Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, now that you have over 30-some fights in your career, and if we were going to bring up another example, even Guillermo Rigondeaux got Nonito Donaire and Vasily Lomachenko. So my big question to Demetrius Andrade is this. What the hell are you doing in your career to not even get one fight even against a former champion in your career? What that tells me is that that's more of a referendum on you. How the hell can you not get one fight over one decent fighter?
But the problem is, Andrade was going to make over $1 million.
Even Jamal Charlo fought Sergey Derevyanchenko, and I don't think that Sergey Derevyanchenko is an elite fighter at all. I don't even think Demetrius Andrade has a fighter on his resume that's on the same level as a Sergey Derevyanchenko.
They first presented this fight to him, and he pulled out of that fight, and that's the reason why they only bid it like $300,000 on the fight. So basically, Demetrius Andrade, he really screwed up when he pulled out of this fight the first time.
Well, you know what? Demetrius Andrade, has been fucking up for a great amount of his career now. And once again, it's nothing personal against him. I don't have anything personal against any of these fighters or any of these athletes that I talk about. But, dude, you can hide behind that excuse all you want to of, oh, well, I'm going after the best fighter. That's the same shit that Terrence Bud Crawford has been stating about Errol Spence for years upon years upon years. Dude, that's cool. But at the end of the day, it took you several years to finally get in a definitive A-grade fight against Sean Porter. Like, come on. Like, you got to do something. And this is what I'm saying. Andrade, if he doesn't face David Benavidez, I really don't see any of those fighters facing him. Because I don't think Canelo is overall really worried about him. I don't think that, he has his main sights on him. Jamal Charlo is not going to fight him. Gennady Golovkin maybe, but, at this point in time in his career, clearly when Gennady is not the same fighter, I just don't know how much more star appeal that fight is going to have when it comes down to it. Maybe you can get a fight with Caleb Plant. Maybe that would be a very interesting fight. Maybe there's a couple of other fights out there. But I'm not even sure if those fights are going to be big enough because I'm not really sure where Caleb Plant's going to be at this point in time in his career after Canelo knocked him out.
Question is, where does he go now? Who is he going to fight now? because this fight would have put Demetrius Andrade in the best position.
Well, in my view, actually, the best position, whether he would have went for the mandatory or not, is to go after David Benavidez. Andre basically has no choice. If he wants to continue his career, and if he does truly want a Canelo Alvarez fight and some of those other big fights, he's going to have to go after David Benavidez. Period. Point blank. There is no other option, in my opinion. Jamal Charlo's not going to do it. He's waiting on Canelo. Gennady Golovkin, I don't know what the hell his plans are when it comes down to it. And Canelo right now is focused on Dimitri Bivol or Jamal Charlo or Benavidez before he's focused on Andrade. So if Andrade really wants to separate himself from some of those fighters, especially in terms of a promotional standpoint, you have to go after David Benavidez. Because I think going after the Chris Eubank Jr.'s and all those guys, unless Chris Eubank Jr. is able to beat Conor Ben in the upcoming fight, I believe that I'll have to do a little bit more of research on that. I haven't really watched either fighter, in a while, but if I had to guess, more than likely I have Conor Ben winning by decision, but we'll have to see on that. Actually, very interesting. I did not know that the fathers, both of those fighters, actually once upon a time fought each other, Mr. Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn, where I believe Chris Eubank was the victor in one of those fights and another one was a draw. But anyways, not to get sidetracked. Unless maybe Chris Eubank Jr. ends up beating Conor Ben, I really don't see overall the appeal of fighting a Danny Jacobs or Chris Eubank Jr. anymore. Now that you're going up to 168 pounds, there's only one fight in my view that is going to capture people's interest, and that's against David Benavidez. And really, if we're going to go there, Andrade might be pretty much done at this point in time in his career anyway. That's not me saying on the note that he's washed up or anything, because I don't think that he is. But I'm not sure if I see him beating a fighter like David Benavidez. He's pretty much overall going to go into a situation that is a very crappy situation. Not me saying that it is 100% his fault, but he's also made certain stupid mistakes in his career that has cost him.
Only other fight that makes sense outside of him, becoming the WBO mandatory. The only other fight that makes sense at 168 is against David Benavidez. That would be the only thing that would make sense is if, Andrade and David Benavidez, they're negotiating right now behind closed doors, which is possible, but it's hard for me to believe that's the case, especially when it comes to Andrade's first fight at 168. Unless he's...
Well, that's very interesting that you bring up that point, Dante. And once again, I've already stated this. They know that Canelo Alvarez is on a different level. You can tell the way that they talk about him. Because whenever they bring up Andrade and Jamal Charlo, and whenever the David Benavidez fight gets brought up, they're like, oh, well, that's a very tough fight for their first fight. But if Canelo moves up the weight division, they expect him to face the best of the best each and every single time. That tells you that their opinions on Canelo, that it's just different. Now, one can say all in all that, well, that's because he's a very decent, he's ranked high in, on the pound per pound list. And, if he is going to be ranked there, then he has to overall, fight the best of the best, right? But they don't really talk about any other fighter almost in that type of way. At least not very many fighters. The only fighters that they do end up talking about in that way is Terrence Bud Crawford and some of those other fighters. But apparently, according to Dante and some of these other channels like Aki TV and Ego, Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo would beat Canelo Alvarez. So why is it that Canelo, every single time that he has to move up the weight divisions, he has to fight all in all the champions or the elite fighters there, but when Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo go there, oh well, let's not give him the David Benavidez straight away. So that tells you right then and there, they know who's the better fighter of the two.
Working out some type of 2-fight or 3-fight deal with PBC because Andrade is a free agent right now. So he can go over to PBC and make a David Benavidez fight if that's what he really wants to do. But if that's not what Andrade is planning on doing, then man, he is really screwing up his career. He is really, really screwing up his career. I mean, he done already messed up his bag, and now he's messing up his career completely.
Well, why don't you allege on all that Demetrius Bobo Andrade is apparently ducking Zach Parker? Now, I'm not really going to go that far because maybe Demetrius Andrade, maybe he just believes that he's being lowballed. Unfortunately, I don't think that's a good enough excuse. But we all know what you'd be saying if this was a Canelo Alvarez thing or something else. You'd be saying, oh, well, he ducked this guy and ducked this guy. This is the same guy that stated that Canelo avoided Sergey Derevyanchenko.
Because if they won't even pay Andrade to fight Zach Parker, then that means If Andrade is not taking on a big name next,
Of course, they're not going to pay him that much to face Zach Parker. Who the hell really wants to see that fight? I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not the worst fight that I've ever seen, but Demetrius Andrade is getting to the point to where people are looking at this guy and it's like, listen, dude, you're costing more money than what you're giving us because he really has no fan base. And I'm not going to blame that 100% on him, but, once again, had he fought the Jamel Charlo fight earlier on in his career or took in some other fights like the Chris Eubank Jr. fight, or all in all the Danny Jacobs fight, his career could be a decent amount different right now.
he ain't going to get no kind of money. They just offered him $184,000 to fight Zach Parker. I mean, listen, at age 34, the move to 168, it made all the sense in the world because once again, Canelo Alvarez and David Benavidez are there. Those are the only two opponents that could truly catapult Demetrius Andrade's career, propel him into pound-for-pound status, and truly secure his future financially. So I don't know what he's planning. I really can't wait to see who Andrade decides to fight and when he's going to come back. Because I remember he did an interview where he sat down, and he did a live and he had his friend asking him questions. And I couldn't get a good read on where he was coming from because, 1 minute he'll call out some fighters. He's calling out Canelo. He's calling out Eubank. But then he starts talking about how boxing is not, my whole life. A lot of people don't know this, but I got a lot of other stuff.
You know who else stated that right before they retired recently? Mikey Garcia. You know who was another fighter that usually did not secure a lot of big fights in his career? Mikey Garcia. So it just is what it is. Now, that's not me stating that Demetrius Andrade is avoiding a certain amount of fights like I thought Mikey did in his past, and some people may disagree with me on that. No, Mikey did avoid certain fights, but it is what it is. There's a reason why Mikey has 40-some fights on his resume, but he has 0 definitive A-grade wins on there. It is what it is. But anyways, when it comes down to it, just to talk about Mr. Demetrius Boo Andrade, what that tells me is that there may be a part of him that has already accepted his fate. And I think that he knows that more than likely that, he's never going to be, within that top level. Maybe, I don't know, he just might try to retire undefeated and he may say, oh, well, I was just so avoided. And listen, once again, do I think that, there are certain people that avoided Andrade? Yes. But at the end of the day, there are certain moves that you could have made in your career that would have been better for you that you did not take. So not all the blame can be on everybody else. Some of it also does have to fall on Mr. Demetrius Boo Andrade.
Going on outside of boxing. And when I hear a fighter say something like that, especially when they're constantly pulling out of fights and making...
Constantly pulling out of fights? I thought you said that Mr. Demetrius Boo Andrade was the boogeyman of boxing. What's this all of a sudden saying that he's constantly pulling out of fights?
Horrible business moves, at least when it comes to boxing. It just makes you wonder, what exactly is Andrade thinking right now? Is he focused the way he used to be focused? We'll find out. Because once again, man, Andrade, he's wasting a lot of time. He's getting a lot.
He's wasted his whole entire career. And you know what? Once again, not all that can be on his plate, but some of it does have to be on there. Because at the end of the day, he's made some dumb-ass decisions in his career. And he can claim on the oh, well, I want to go after Canelo. I want to go after this guy and this guy. That's cool. But just like I've stated about Terrence Bud Crawford, and Crawford actually gets viewership. So it just is what it is. It's no offense against Andrade, but no one usually cares to watch him fight. It's not that I don't think he's a decent fighter. I watch him. But at the end of the day, the majority average boxing fan is not usually that excited to watch Demetrius Boo Andrade. Just is what it is. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, there's only one fight in my view that he's going to have to take. That's the David Benavidez fight. There's no other fight that I see viable for Demetrius Boo Andrade.
Older, and it's either now or never. Okay, now let me talk to the Mexican fans that I see sometimes celebrating in my comment section, saying that Demetrius Andrade is ducking this guy with laughing emojis, etc., etc. It's funny because when they see news like this, they look at it as a victory. It's a celebration.
Well, let's also be real, Mr. DontesBoxingNation, and I understand what point you're trying to get at, but when Mr. Tyson Fury apparently overall stated that he didn't want to face Dillian White, even though alleging that he was ducking Dillian White, in my view, was a step too far, you basically went on that very quickly. And whenever it comes to a video about Canelo or Lomachenko or Fury or a fighter that you don't like allegedly ducking someone, you're very quick to make it.
For them when they see Andrade turning down fights, no matter who it's against. And the reason why they're so happy because they feel that this is pressure off of Canelo.
I don't completely disagree with you there, Dante. But once again, we all know that when it comes to certain fighters that you like or dislike, you're very similar.
What of a deflection to get people off of talking about a possible fight with Andrade and Canelo. They're looking at all this news like, man, this means Canelo Alvarez is really not going to have to fight him now. When in reality, if you truly felt that Canelo Alvarez was better than Andrade, better than Charlo, or any of these guys, this news should upset you. That's how real boxing fans react when someone...
Well, I somewhat get what your point is, Mr. Dante, and I don't think that that's the worst point in the world. But if we're going to look at reality, even the people that, may want to see a little bit of Andrade get the bigger fights, I don't know if a lot of people really care about Andrade overall versus some of these bigger fighters. I mean, that's not me saying that they don't care, but I think that if we were to talk about Canelo versus Andrade, there are a certain amount of people that would have that fight as number one on their list, but not very many. I think most people would prefer probably to see the David Benavidez or Jamal Charlo fights or the Dimitri Bivol rematch. So my point is about Mr. Demetrius Andrade is, look, out of any of those fighters that I just mentioned, you pretty much get the least viewership out of any of those other fighters I just mentioned. So you're going to have to separate yourself from the pack, whether that be promotional wise or whether that be skill wise. The only way to do that at this point in time in his career is against David Benavidez, and that's if he can beat him.
Pulls out of a fight. It's just like the Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Tank Davis fight that's in negotiations right now. For years, everyone had been talking about the Fantastic Four that included Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Tank Davis. Now the fight is in negotiations. Right now, I can guarantee you, Mexican fans deep down, they're praying that that fight doesn't happen. Only real boxing fans are...
The fight, in my opinion, that would be better than the Gervonta Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia fight, in my view, would be Teofimo Lopez versus Ryan Garcia. That would be the fight that I would prefer to see, because I don't know if Ryan Garcia is quite ready for the best version of Gervonta Tank Davis, at least in my opinion. I just think Gervonta is a little bit too experienced and a little bit too skilled. I think that Ryan Garcia, maybe if he were to get a victory over Teofimo Lopez, that he would be decently ready for Tank, or that it would be a 50-50 fight. In my view, it still could be a competitive matchup, but I think that Ryan Garcia, in my opinion, he's just not completely ripened yet. But anyway.
Really looking forward to that fight happening.
I mean, to me, it would be like if David Morrell, ended up facing David Benavidez at the current moment in time. I mean, David Morrell looks very talented, but I don't think he's really fully grown yet.
They don't want to see it because deep down, they feel Ryan Garcia is going to become another Gervonta Tank Davis victim. So they never wanted to see Canelo versus Charlo. They never wanted to see Canelo versus Andrade. They don't want to see Gervonta versus Ryan Garcia because they are used to seeing Mexican fighters lose to undefeated black boxers historically.
Well, I understand the point that you're trying to make, Mr. Dante, and I'm not going to state that every single thing that you said was false there. But there are a certain amount of people that do want to see the Benavidez and do want to see the Jamal Charlo fights. The problem is with Mr. Demetrius Andrade is that I don't know a lot of people that are that are chanting at the mountaintops to see a Demetrius Andrade versus Canelo Alvarez fight. If you ask, let's say if you have 10 people, and if you ask them which fight all in all do you want to see Canelo Alvarez in next, 9 times out of 10, they're more than likely either going to say Charlo or the Bivol rematch, or they're going to say David Benavidez. Those are the main fights that they want to see. Maybe in our Beta Beef, you may get one person that says Demetrius Bubo Andrade. That's the problem. Demetrius Andrade at this point in time, and Dante is correct, it's now or never for Andrade. He has to get a big fight in now. He has to.
And I got to reiterate, that's why once again, them hearing that Andrade is pulling out of this Zach Parker fight to become the WBO mandatory for Canelo Alvarez is the best news they've ever heard. For us, the best news is when a fight is announced. For them,
if you're asking me personally which fight I would see or I would like to see Canelo win next, I would personally like to see the Jamal Charlo fight. That's a fight that a lot of people have been clamoring for a very long time. It's a fight that I've always been interested in. I don't think that Jamal Charlo is really on the same level as Canelo in almost any dimension, but I just still think it's interesting because that would almost kind of be like Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia. You know more than likely how it's going to turn out, but it's still very particularly interesting because it's just another great name to add to the resume.
Best news is when someone is pulling out of the fight. And that's why they're always using laughing emojis when they're talking about news like this in my comment section. Now, let me close out with saying this. When you guys are trying to compare Demetrius Andrade's situation to Canelo Alvarez's situation, to all the Mexican fans right now, let me ask you this question. If I were to ask you, who is the best fighter out of Charlo, Andrade, and Canelo? We already know you guys are going to definitely say it's Canelo, right?
I understand the point that you're trying to get at, Dante, but you yourself claim that Demetrius Andrade is the best fighter out of those bunches. In fact, you claim that Canelo is not even on the Jamal Charlo level. That's what you claim. You say that Canelo is not on the Benavidez, Charlo, or the Demetrius Andrade level. So if you are going to state that, then shouldn't Andrade be held to a higher standard? So why are you not criticizing Andrade in the same way that you're criticizing a Canelo Alvarez? Could it be because you know deep down that Canelo Alvarez that he's on a higher caliber? Let's just be real. Could it also be a little bit because he's on the pound for pound list and you want to make the narrative that he's overhyped and overrated? Sure. But once again, if you truly held Demetrius Andrade to the same standard, you would criticize him a hell of a lot more. Once again, the fighters that he always criticizes the most are the ones that are of different complexion than his own, overall that are looked at as the number one pound for pound fighter. I have been saying this for years, and people have disagreed with me. They said, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." Here's the proof right here.
So the difference from what Andrade is doing and what Canelo Alvarez is doing, according to your logic, Andrade, he's going after the best fighter. Canelo on the other.
Well, according to you, when it comes down to it, Dante, Canelo is not the best fighter. So he should be going after David Benavidez because how many times have we heard Dante's Boxing Nation claim that Canelo Alvarez is not even the best in his own weight division? So Andrade now has to go after David Benavidez. So that excuse is no longer going to fly. Now, I understand what Dante's trying to get at. I don't think that is the worst point. But if you're going to overall state that, let's also be real, Dante. You've stated a multitude of times that you don't think Canelo's on the level of David Benavidez or Charlo or Andrade. So which is it?
Hand is often avoiding the most dangerous fighter to fight.
No, he's not. And I've already stated this. Caleb Plant is pretty much on the same level as a Demetrius Andrade and a Jamal Charlo, if not even slightly above Jamal Charlo. Now, Andrade, if you wanted to debate that there's certain things that he does better than Caleb Plant, you could, but one could also debate that there's certain things that Caleb Plant does better than Demetrius Andrade. Just is what it is. But anyway.
Weakest link. With the exception of him fighting Bivol, and that was because he had no choice. Because Canelo
Alvarez always has a choice. He fought Demetrius Bivol because he wanted to try to become unified at the 175-pound division. But Dante is not going to admit that because he hates Canelo Alvarez's guts. Anyway.
For the first time in 4 years, he only had 2 options on the table. And both options were tough fights.
Canelo Alvarez, when you're on the level of a Canelo, you can fight basically anyone that you want to. Now, that doesn't mean that that's always the right thing to do, but Canelo pretty much has been fighting whoever the hell that he's wanted to for the past several years, and the majority of those fighters have been A-grade champions. Caleb Plant, Callum Smith, and Billy Joe Saunders included, and he was going to go up to face Ilunga Makabu. I actually was interested in the fight because I was going to be curious to see how Canelo was going to be able to handle that weight. Now, is Makabu, in my opinion, an A-grade fighter? No, he's not. No, he's not. But because Canelo is pretty much a natural middleweight, or super middleweight at most, that is a very particularly interesting matchup, in my view, to see if he actually can win a belt at the cruiserweight division.
Or fight Bivol or fight Jamal Charlo. Those were his only options. He didn't have an option to fight either Bivol, Charlo, or Makabu and John Ryder.
Because let's keep in mind that when that Bivol fight happened, Dante at first was stating that, Canelo Alvarez, that he won't fight Bivol because that's too tough of a fight. But then when Bivol and Canelo Alvarez actually happened, what did he state? He said, "Oh well, Canelo must have thought that that was going to be easier than the Charlo fight. That's why he must have taken it." So Dante is not going to give credit to Canelo no matter what he does, and that's how you can tell that he just does not like him.
We know if those were the options, we know who he would have chose. So Andrade, he's been trying to fight Golovkin, Canelo Alvarez, who you consider pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. That's not what Canelo Alvarez does. And I also want to say this.
Canelo Alvarez has fought repeated A-grade champions. And you can state that all you want to, that, oh, well, Andrade is going after Canelo, the alleged best fighter. Right, but you can only use that excuse for so long. Terrence Bud Crawford has been using that excuse for a very long time as well. Listen, at the end of the day, if you think that that elite fighter is avoiding you or that that fight isn't going to happen, you're going to have to face fighters on the know that are going to get you to that fight, like a David Benavidez.
Another difference between Andrade's situation and Canelo's situation is, see, nobody is calling Andrade pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world, including myself.
You're not calling Demetrius Andrade one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world, but you've stated a multitude of times that Demetrius Andrade, if they were to face that, Andrade all in all would beat Canelo hands down. Yeah, that sure makes sense. And on top of that, a few years ago, or just a couple years ago, actually, that's a lie. You actually had Demetrius Andrade on your top 10 pound for pound list. Him and Jamal Charlo.
So Andrade, when he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, he gets the backlash that he's supposed to get. He has everything to lose in this situation. See, Canelo was different because when Canelo was avoiding all of the best competition, old media was still protecting him. They were calling him the best fighter in the world for doing it. This is my point.
Because Canelo Alvarez at that point in time was the best fighter in the world. You can say whatever you want to, Dante, but Caleb Plant at one point in time, when he fought him, was a very dangerous fighter. And obviously, new media in the LDBC knew that because I already came out with a video a couple weeks ago to where you had Champ Side and some of those other fighters claiming that Caleb Plant was a very dangerous fighter and that Canelo was apparently going to avoid him. But as soon as that fight happened, what'd they say? Oh, well, Caleb Plant actually, he isn't really that good. So come on. Let's stop the bullshit.
If Canelo was getting the treatment that Demetrius Andrade gets when he's not fighting anyone, meaning they don't have Canelo close.
No, the difference between Canelo and Demetrius Andrade is that Canelo is actually usually facing consistent champions, whether they're the champions that you want him to face or not. Now, if you have, the gripe that you want to see the Charlo and Andrade and Benavidez fights, and that's your business, that's cool, and I get it. But we can't claim that Plant and Saunders and Smith that they were just bums because that's not the truth. All those guys were decent A-grade caliber champions, and they're about on the same level as a Charlo and Andrade if we're really going to go there. Because who has Andrade really beat in his career? Now, just because we bring up that point doesn't always mean that a fighter is not more talented. I can bring up Jerron Boots Ennis and I can say, oh, well, who has he really beat in his career to be compared to Sean Porter? But on the surface, it looks like Jerron Boots Ennis is more talented than a Sean Porter. But when I take a look at Andrade, I really don't see that much of a difference between him or Caleb Plant, to be honest with you. I just don't.
The pound for pound list, then the boxing world wouldn't be talking that much about Canelo Alvarez. And this is why I always
people talk about Canelo Alvarez overall, and you can bring up that complexion for the protection all you want to, but no, that is an asinine statement. People talk about Canelo because he is a great fighter, because he has Lara and Golovkin and Cotto and Jacobs and Smith and all in all, Khan and Chavez Jr. and overall Danny Jacobs and Gennady Golovkin, if I didn't mention him, and Saunders and Smith and Plant. He has all those guys on his resume. Canelo is a phenomenal fighter, and that's the reason why they talk about him. But Dante always wants to make you believe that the reason why people talk about Canelo is just because he's pretty much a Caucasoid Mexican, or that he looks like a Caucasoid Mexican, or a what overall is the word for it when it comes down to it, a Caucasian Hispanic. That's overall the reason why he wants to make you believe that Canelo Alvarez is mainly talked about. No, Canelo is talked about because Canelo is a real deal fighter.
Tell you, old media puts a curse on these fighters on the hope list. Canelo Alvarez, or Noe, or whoever, because They get
What did I tell you on the know that Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation was soon going to do with Naiwa Inoue? He was eventually going to go after him. Once again, I've been stating this for a very long time. He has a problem with fighters that are of a different complexion that are ranked within the top pound for pound list. I've been saying this for a very long time. And what do you know? I told people that he was going to go after Inoue next, and look at that.
overrated.
And don't get me wrong, in my view, Inoue is not top 5 pound for pound either. But that just goes to show you what mainly Dante's objective is. He does not want any other fighters other than black fighters, mainly being on the top 10 pound for pound list.
Fighters. And they put them all the way on the top of the sport. And every single time they put these fighters on the top of the sport, those fighters become the first fighters to lose out of the bunch because they never belonged in that position in the first place.
Well, you can make that point all you want to, Mr. Dante, but no, it was very clear that Lomachenko and Canelo did deserve to be in that position. You can argue that all you want to, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, Canelo has defeated A-grade champion after A-grade champion, all the way from European fighters to black fighters to Latino fighters. And Vasily Lomachenko was very, very similar. You know, yes, do they have losses in their career? Yes, they do. But for their dominant stretch, they deserve to be ranked as the #1 pound for pound fighter, at least for that particular time. And if Canelo was able to beat Bivol in the rematch, which would be a very tall task, he very well might regain his #1 pound for pound footing. But we'll see what happens there.
If they would have treated Canelo Alvarez like the fighter he truly is, then he never would have been in every single fighter's crosshairs. Old media made Canelo
The fighter that Canelo Alvarez is an all-time great fighter. Whether you want to admit it or not, Dante, those are the facts of the situation.
Alvarez a bigger target. Now, sure, he would have still had the reputation of ducking the best competition, but he would be flying under the radar. Like Jaime Munguia or Virgil Ortiz, for example. No one's talking a whole lot about Jaime Munguia, the fact that he was Charlo.
Right, so basically your main problem with Canelo was that he's ranked so high in the pound for pound list. And I've already told people this. All right, I've been telling people this for years upon years upon years. That's his main problem with Canelo. Okay?
When Andrade's mandatory, because no one is praising him as pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. No one is.
Right, but because they can't. When you talk about Jaime Munguia and Virgil Ortiz, those guys, even though, you know, talented, if you want to claim that, they're not pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. They don't have the resume for that. Canelo was a fighter that, you know, once again, I just listed you several different A-grade fighters that he's fought. You know, so at the end of the day, Dante can try to make this point all he wants to. For those of us that have a logical, sound mind, we know that Canelo is a real deal fighter.
Comparing Jaime Munguia to Floyd Mayweather or Sugar Ray Leonard or Robinson, right? The reason why Canelo
gets compared to some of those fighters is because they see the exact same thing that I see. Canelo is an all-time great fighter. You cannot beat the severity of styles that he has beaten the multitude of fighters that he has beaten and not be an all-time great fighter. Canelo is pretty much a natural middleweight, and he is a 4-weight division champion. You have to be a very special fighter to achieve that.
It's blasted because old media have been misleading the public for years, telling us that Canelo is pound for pound the best fighter in the world over fighters like Terrence Crawford, Errol.
Which he was, because no offense against Terrence Crawford, but he hasn't really beat anyone other than Sean Porter, so it just is what it is. You can claim that all you want to, but once again, it's so interesting. He'll claim that Canelo goes after the weakest links, but Gervonta Tank Davis and Terrence Crawford by facing Aegis Kyle Velasquez and Isaac Pitbull Cruz and, you know, Jose Benavidez. Apparently these are A-grade caliber fighters. Like, what are you talking about, dude?
Spence. And it turned out to be a big lie. Canelo had more.
No, it wasn't a big lie whatsoever. Canelo, all in all, is a real deal fighter. And even some of those fighters will tell you that they thought that Canelo was #1 pound for pound. Even certain fighters from his own same weight class, you know, like a Jamal Charlo.
Of an incentive.
Do you know how many black fighters there were that stated that Canelo was #1 pound for pound? Shakur Stevenson said that all in all one point in time. Errol Spence Jr., Jamal Charlo, Devin Haney, Gervonta Tank Davis. So it's just not just some coinky dink. But that's why every time those fighters have stated something positive about Canelo, he has to try to tear it down and say, oh, well, the only reason why they're doing that is because they don't want the racist fans to get mad at them. No, the reason why they overall congratulate Canelo and compliment him is because Real recognizes real.
To avoid the best competition because he knew old media, they were trying to protect him. In fact, old media was encouraging Canelo Alvarez to avoid the tough competition. But old media is not encouraging Demetrius Andrade to avoid the best competition. It's going to be the complete contrary. Andrade is not going to get awarded for fighting against weak opposition. So if he
Which he's pretty much fought for his whole entire career.
doesn't do what he's supposed to do in his career, he just will never be considered pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. And he'll retire as an underachiever. So the question is, why would Canelo Alvarez fans be comparing Canelo to a fighter like Andrade who's not on the pound for pound list in terms of who?
Because you put him on your top 10 pound for pound list and you claim that Demetrius Boo Andrade can get overall Canelo Alvarez out of there. You claim that Andrade would beat up Canelo, which I don't think that you even truly believe when it comes down to it. But you have a narrative to play out pretty similar to how you talk about Canelo, and you don't believe that he's number one pound for pound, so that's why you talk about him so much. That's the reason why. But I know that you know that Canelo's on a higher level than what you're alleging. Because every fight that Canelo takes, it's always tough at first when it comes down to it, or he won't beat this guy, he won't beat this guy. But then as soon as the fight's about to happen, oh, well, he's fighting him off his worst performance. Like, come on, man, get the fuck out of here.
They're fighting. They don't even realize what they're really saying is Canelo Alvarez, just like Demetrius Andrade, was never considered pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world.
No, what they're saying, Dante, is that if you're going to keep the standards towards Canelo, that he's allegedly avoiding this fighter by doing this and doing this, even though he's facing still decent champions. If you're going to put that standard on Canelo Alvarez, shouldn't the same standard be on Demetrius Boo Andrade? That's all they're saying.
That's why they're comparing him to someone who's not on the list. I mean, you're supposed to be comparing Canelo to other people on the pound for pound list if you truly felt that he was one of the best in the world. You should be comparing him to Terrence Crawford, to Errol Spence. Not someone who's not even on the list. But once again, it's a deflection tactic. You notice they celebrate that Andrade is not fighting Zach Parker, but yet they still are not saying, man, I really want to see Canelo versus Andrade. I'm so sick of people saying that Canelo is scared of him. I just want to see Canelo destroy him, to shut everyone up. You never hear them say that. They're happy with the fact that it most likely won't happen. Now, I'm going to go ahead and...
Well, I don't completely disagree with you there with some of the fans on the know that maybe don't want the fight to happen. But once again, Dante, if you're going to criticize Canelo on a daily basis, you have to criticize Demetrius Boo Andrade when he doesn't make the correct moves in his career either. And in my view, Canelo, you can say whatever you want about Canelo, but at the end of the day, Canelo is usually going to face decent A-grade caliber fighters.
Got this.
Andrade has not even fought one champion or even one former champion in his career. I can't name one.
Short and wrap this one up. And I say cut it short because I actually have more to say about this, but I might have to make a second Andrade video. But yeah, we'll get back to this discussion. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check.
But anyways, that's really about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that. Very particularly interesting. But anyways, that's really about it. We will see what Mr. Demetrius Boo Andrade does. Once again, in my view, there's only one fight that is going to make sense. He has to take the David Benavidez fight. And some people may ask, well, you don't seem to criticize Canelo for not taking the David Benavidez fight. Why is that? Because Canelo is going to face, one way or another, usually a decent A-grade fighter. Now, would I like to see the David Benavidez fight? Yes, I would, but I had no problem with the Caleb Plant fight. If Demetrius Andrade was facing someone that I thought was decent, like a Jamal Charlo, or all in all, someone else, not even a David Benavidez, I think all in all that it would be a very good fight. I can maybe let, you not facing David Benavidez slide if I think that you're still going to face somewhat decently A-grade caliber. Just like if Gervonta Tank Davis, if he doesn't face Devin Haney next, but he faces Lomachenko, I can probably let that slide. But when it comes down to it, Andrade really has no option. If he wants to face Canelo or some of these other big guys, he's going to have to face David Benavidez because he has fucked up his career so bad with some of the decisions that he has made. He's just going to have to do it. Period. Point blank. But anyways, that's really about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that because that was very particularly interesting. And I believe a couple of you asked me to review that as well. And that's really about it. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Talk to you all later. and I'll see you later.